Hello. Thank you for joining us for Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. This is episode 19. Our guest is Shawna Vercher. We're focusing on post-election despair, anxiety, and fear. My name is Neil Parekh. That's my co-host, Dawn Helmrich Newberg. This is another special show. I kind of feel like every show is becoming really special, Dawn.
Seriously.
We talked about this last week after the elections, and of course, we had announced and we had planned on doing a special show this evening to launch your book online, at least the kind of a virtual book launch. Of course, The Blue Flower Curtain. But with the election results, we all just realized that this was a discussion that we had to have today. We wanted to create space for people to share what their experience was like election night and in the days after. And Shawna Vercher, who's actually going to be a guest, she had planned to be a guest on our December show. She was the perfect one to join us tonight for this discussion. So we're actually going to be having Shawna join us both tonight and on December 12th. On December 12th, she's going to be focusing, the episode is Finding Happiness After Trauma. So that's going to be episode 20, Thursday, December 12th. But today, we're going to be focusing on the elections, post-election despair, anxiety, fear, whatever the emotions are that you're having. And we want people to feel like they're being listened to, that they have a safe space. We're trying to build community and really emphasize, at the end of the day, self-care.
Yeah, and I really want to just give a huge shout out to Shawna. That we literally gave her a week's notice and she jumped right in, and just so grateful for her to take the time to do this with us today. So big shout out to her.
Absolutely. For folks who may not have caught our last episode, I was making a reference to how every episode is feels very special at this point. Our last episode was a candid conversation, real talk about suicide and suicidal ideation. Our guest was Cindy Hsu, who is a news anchor with WCBS, and she shared her story. This was her blog post that she was forever grateful for her second chance. She almost ruined everything in 2015 when severe depression hit, and I attempted suicide. That was a quote from her blog post. What I'd like to do, Dawn, is just play a quick clip from that show and just kind of honor kind of what that discussion was, since that was such an important topic for us. And it's something that you and I have both experienced in terms of ideation. So again, this was from a few weeks ago, but this is Cindy Hsu with her closing thoughts.
I just want to say, if you are worried about someone, check on them. It could be a little text. I've been concerned about you. How are you? And then start that conversation. Really, really listen. And if you are having thoughts of suicide, signs of depression, there's so much help out there. And I think a lot of people are worried about, the cost of therapists and things like that. I just want to say Psychology Today, if you go to their website, they have you just look up, psychologists available that take insurance, and they have a whole list. That's how I found my daughters all over the world. And they cannot, it can be by Zoom. So, and also know that sometimes people don't believe in therapy. Sometimes just, it takes a little bit of time, maybe to find the right one, but it's worth it, because you really need that person to listen to you, who's an expert and can help you work through this. And there is hope, and you're not alone.
And that was Cindy Hsu from our last episode. I want to remind folks that we are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website. We're also live. We're usually live on my Facebook and Instagram, and Dawn's Facebook and Instagram. But we're also live on Shawna Presley Vercher's Facebook and Twitter accounts. So thank you to everyone who's watching on those channels. This show is brought to you with pro bono support from Digimentors, and I'm always so thankful for the support that we get. That they give me the time and space to put this show together. So thank you to Sri and everyone else. Let's say hello to some of the folks watching, and then we'll bring in Shawna Presley Vercher. Speaking of Digimentors, my colleague there, Stefan Kaplan, is watching. Says such a special and important topic during this most unnerving time. Unnerving is definitely a good way to put it. Jonathan Borstein is watching from New York. My mom is watching from Hastings-on-Hudson, so the Parik. Tiffany Westerfield is watching, a former guest and a friend of yours, Dawn.
Hi, Tiffany.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. And if you care to share how you are feeling or how you've been reacting to the election results, please put it in the comments and we will read it out loud. Kate says hello and thank you so much for addressing this issue. Kate is another former guest, close friend of Dawn's. In fact, your landlady downstairs,
yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yep. And speaking, so she's downstairs, and
yep.
Jim is down
on the other side of the wall,
right? Somewhere over there. From the wall, there's Jim Newberg, Dawn's husband.
Yeah.
Not fiance, husband, which is pretty cool. And Stefan says he's been numb and filled with anxiety for days now. He landed back here at Newark from Geneva on November 6th at noon. I remember he was over, when he was posting about that on election day, that he was over there and was never so upset to come home because of what transpired overnight. Absolutely.
Feel ya,
Stefan.
Feel ya.
It was a rough day. And that, that evening, but also that next day. So let's go ahead and bring on Shawna, and we'll get this conversation started. And feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and we will make you part of the show as well. What I wanted to do is the morning after the elections, I actually was producing yet another show. I produced 10 hours of election coverage over 4 days. Srinivasan was the host. It was Sri's special election coverage. And Shawna was our guest at 8:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning, on the morning after. This is what she had to say on that show.
Okay, well, I am a fixer, so sometimes that does mean trying to help things before they break, which was something that we've been working hard on these last several months. But sometimes, a lot of times, too often, I'm also a crisis manager. So right now, I think for me, I've had to personally shift into crisis management mode, but at the same time, to be honest, it feels like a death. I think we're all going to have, well, not all of us, I guess about 50%, 50% of us are going to have a grieving process to go through that is real and sincere. I think we're going to talk about this analytically, but I would just also try to give yourself some space and some grace today, because this is going to feel like grief for so many folks.
And that's Shawna Presley Vercher. This is going to feel like grief for so many people. Shawna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you both for having this important conversation.
Absolutely. Shawna, can you tell us, that was kind of where you were on Wednesday morning, less than 12 hours, till from when we realized what was happening. I mean, I pegged it around 10 o'clock. I kind of saw the writing on the wall, although obviously nothing was called till much later. Where have you been since then emotionally?
Well, I have kind of a different process, I think, than some, though I would argue as parents, probably not as uncommon as some might think. Your first thought as a parent, but also as a crisis manager in particular, is to take care of others first. There's no time to process what's happening. Just get through what your obligations are, make sure that the people around you are okay. And that took days, because candidly they weren't. We had members of our team that suddenly did not feel safe for different reasons. I had my college age daughter on the phone sobbing, as I know many parents had disappointments and just really tough emotions. I think it's harder when we can't make it go away from them, make it magically be better. But once we got through the immediate, okay, what right now do we have to take care of to feel safe? Then I went through my own feelings of rage, to be honest. I was very angry at the system. I was very angry that, as a woman in particularly, I hadn't felt heard or validated, and that I felt that this was sending a signal to women everywhere that we are second-class citizens. And then from there, I needed a lot of rest. And it was only after doing that I was able to start thinking about what's next. And we're just now starting to pick up those pieces, but it's not linear. If I'm being very, very honest with everyone right now, I worked half of the day from my PJs in bed with my laptop, because that's how I could function. And I just needed to give myself some grace. I was like, do I have meetings right now? No. Am I expecting the king to come over? No. So here we live in a t-shirt and, pajama pants with our laptop, because I'm at least halfway vertical, and that's okay for today. And I think for many of us that are dealing with grief, and then also triggering other things such as depression and post-traumatic stress, then we are going to waffle from, yeah, let's do this, let's fix the world, to, oh my gosh, are you telling me I have to shower now on top of breathing in and out? And we're just going to have to be okay with that for a little while.
It certainly has been rough, and I think that a lot of people have really, had some difficulty figuring out what to make of everything, and how to process things. I know that Tiffany shared a comment, and I think she speaks for a lot of people. I'm having panic attacks. I'm really surprised at how much this has affected me. I really thought Harris would win, and now I'm just overwhelmed with uncertainty. And that's, I think there are a number of people, a number of groups out there that feel targeted, that feel like they're, that all hell's going to break loose, at any moment. And particularly, when you have someone like Matt Gaetz being named as Trump's pick to be Attorney General, someone who is, for anyone who has experienced trauma, who has survived sexual assault, to see someone like Matt Gaetz in that position of power. But it's not just women, as you were talking about. I know a lot of people of color are concerned. There are people in the trans community who are absolutely afraid of what's going to come. But there's also just a general, like, oh my God, like, how could half the country do this? Like, what were they thinking? Am I so confused? Am I so wrong that, like, I'm so out of touch with reality that Trump is actually a viable alternative?
So
I mean,
think that's, go ahead. I'm sorry, Don.
No, I was just going to say, Shawna, I recall when we had our prep conversation, it was shortly after the election, and you were literally talking about having to help someone leave the country because they were not safe. They did not feel safe. Could you just talk a little bit about that, unless you want to respond to Neil first?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think that what we're having to wrestle with right now, and talking about, to Tiffany and others that are having panic attacks, I think it's really taking a moment to say that two things can be true. The first is that some people genuinely do not feel safe. And first of all, I want to say that's enough. Like, you don't need to validate it any further than that. If you don't feel safe, that's it, done. That doesn't mean always, however, you can change everything instantly, but it does mean start making a plan. And if we're being very honest, some people are less safe today than they were 4 weeks ago or however long, right? But at the same time, I just want to gently correct something that Neil is saying, that we are all saying in our heads. which is half the country. It's just absolutely
It's
not
not.
true,
It's not
right?
half the
It's
country.
barely half of the voters, which
Absolutely.
is a sub portion of people that are eligible to vote, which is a sub portion of people who are in this country. And out of those people, most of them are not awful people. They just either don't pay attention, or they don't think it's that bad, or they don't understand what it's like to be in one of these marginalized communities. So I think if you're having a panic attack, or you're trying to assess, and it's like really, really important to say right now to ourselves, yes, this is a situation that needs to be changed. However, stop for a second and really focus on what can we fix and what can be done, and not do what I call spiraling, right? It's very, very easy to say, oh my gosh, the world is ending. All of these things could go wrong. And again, not belittling those feelings. A lot could go wrong, but where are we in this moment, and what can be done, and how do we find allies? So I have a very close friend who is trans, and she no longer feels comfortable in the state. So she is looking to move. We are helping her family with that as much as we can, as are so many others. That is a real concern in certain states. There were nearly $1 billion spent on advertising to position members of the trans community as predators, as other, as less than human. That campaign had an effect, and at any given time, walking out to a parking lot in a mall at all, sometimes women don't feel safe. Now add that on top of it. So unfortunately, the lack of safety is true. Is there nowhere safe for her to go? Absolutely not. There are so many communities that would welcome her. So for us, it's about acknowledging the dark, but then saying, okay, what can we do to just inch closer to whatever light we can find?
I appreciate that, and I want to say hello, Paula Tiger, another colleague of mine at Digimentors from Tallahassee, Florida. So you're in the Tampa area, if I'm not mistaken, right, Shawna?
I am, but Go Knowles, I was in Tallahassee for years, so I love it dearly.
But Paula Tiger is watching, and Tiffany followed up on her comment by saying that she just can't watch the news right now, which I totally understand. And I think for me, I watch news and I look at the headlines on the New York Times, frankly, almost to see what craziness happened today. It's just a lot. My mom is watching from Hastings. She says this was a great loss. I felt as if I had lost a dear person from my life. I'm still undergoing grieving, like denial, anger, depression, and you feel, how can this happen? It's hard to accept it. She says she's unable to accept it, and we just don't feel secure. Stefan said, I can't believe how far we have fallen. I know I'll snap out of it. I must. But it's hard right now as we have to go through the upcoming holiday season knowing what lies ahead. Thank the heavens for my love of photography. It really keeps me going in so many ways. If folks remember, Stefan was a guest on our show over, I believe it was August, where he talked about how he goes out and does nature photography to help, kind of calm his nerves, to keep anxiety at bay. And so really a lot of what we've talked about is self-care at this particular time. Dawn, I want to bring you in because you wrote a blog post about your experience with the results. And part of what you said is waking up to the election nightmare, thinking about what the future holds. That was the title. I woke up and asked my husband about the results, and he broke the news to me. I cried a little more, and I went to work. I felt like a zombie all day. I wasn't present most of the day. Can you talk a little bit about that experience in terms of that feeling like a zombie? But then also, you talked about what you did later in the week. I think it was Friday night. You did some karaoke as well, right?
Yeah. So when I say I felt like a zombie, I mean, I really mean that. Like, I literally felt like I was walking around not present, not in like my own body. trying to figure out like what just happened. And like you said, Shauna, you know, my the first thing that I woke up to was a Snapchat from my daughter who said, I can't believe that this is happening. And another Snapchat from my son with it was just a black screen and it just said RIP America. And like my heart broke for both of them, right? You know, like I think about like I've, you know, they're 22 and 23 and, you know, I've raised them, but they're still my children. And, you know, they may someday have children and, you know, what do they how are they going to, you know, get through whatever's going to happen over the next 4 years. And so my husband and I, we both were just we were a mess. We were just an absolute mess. And so on Friday night, we decided to do karaoke because it's one of the things that I love, and I've talked about that on the show before. And you know, we sang songs about like peace and hope and love, and some, you know, political songs that we found that, you know, just helped us kind of walk through our feelings and what we were experiencing. So that was really cathartic for us to be able to do that, to use music to help us through that.
And Shauna, you've been emphasizing self-care as well. You've been doing a series of TikTok videos. In general, you've been great on TikTok and have a great presence there. But you really emphasize this need to build community and create a supportive space for people. What are you talking to people about in terms of self-care?
So for us, I look at things as we're in a battle right now. And so even though we are warriors and even though we lost this particular battle, we're not giving up the war for the soul of this nation and for this planet. And that is how dire the stakes are, in my opinion. And I think when you look at very large issues like countries at war, what's happening with climate change, what's happening with how we value women, the LGBTQ community, and people of color. This is a wrestling for our soul, and we had a gigantic setback. But as warriors, we have to continue to feed and fuel ourselves. If we are going to go back into battle, which, you know, that's going to be a different timeline for different people, and it's going to look differently for different people. But for some people, day-to-day life is somewhat of a battle. And so to do that, we really do have to practice a certain type of care. Now, some of that is when you can say no, say no. And I cannot express that enough. I heard someone say to me once, every time you say yes, you're saying no to something else. And man, did that hit me like a ton of bricks. There's all these obligations that we've kind of been programmed that we need to do. And some of them we have to, and some of them we are choosing to because we don't want to hurt feelings, etc. But if you can say no, then try that so that you can say yes to yourself. That is going to be a big part of getting us through these next few months. We have been barreling through nonstop over the last several months for a lot of reasons. But when you think about this election season, it has just been a blur. So going directly into another barreling through of the holidays and just get through it and just say yes and just tune out is absolutely not what I would recommend. And then the other thing is that when you're talking about an enemy of darkness, when you are talking about whether it is hate or hopelessness or despair, then what does that enemy feed off of? It feeds off of you feeling lost. And so whatever you can do to find yourself and feel like yourself is absolutely something that should be prioritized. For Dawn, it is music. For Stefan, it is photography. It might be just going on a picnic with your kids and letting them play in the park. Whatever it is that makes you feel just a little bit more connected to who you are as a person, that is really going to be important, because when you're in battle mode, you kind of tune out everything around you. You just get through it. You're very mission centered. And when you have lost that battle, you now not only don't have the mission anymore, the distraction is gone, and whatever you were left with before that made you unhappy is now even more amplified now. So finding those glimmers is going to be absolutely critical. And then I also would say, as much as I don't want people to run a marathon over the holidays, do not isolate. I don't care who you have to talk to, whether it's going and joining one of those painting with wine classes, whatever it is, I don't care. But please talk and connect to other humans, because isolation is also extremely dangerous, because that is when doubt and depression absolutely thrive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we have to remember is that we're also, we have a long road ahead of us. I think that for a lot of people, again, folks that we're talking to, that, kind of who may be watching this show, and others, and people who are like-minded, again, not half the country, it's almost like a third or less. But there are a number of people who are just shocked that first day, and just kind of, just coming to grips with like what happened, and it's taken several days, and it's not necessarily something that you are ready to pick yourself up and get back into the arena 2 days later, 3 days later, a week later. We still have this transition to go through. We still have January 20th. The inauguration is on the same day as Martin Luther King Day. That's just something else to kind of try to wrap your head around, and what that would be like. And then we have 4 years of God knows what. And just today, RFK Jr. being tapped as a potential health secretary, with his anti-vaxxer and kind of real medicine stands. It is just, it's going to be a lot, and we're going to have to find a way to not just keep going, but also, have people step in and step out over the course of time. Rose Horowitz is watching. She's another colleague, Digimentor's colleague. She's in Connecticut, and she has a comment I want to read out. I have friends who will not watch any TV news. I waited until the weekend to start reading news analysis. As someone who loves news, I cannot stop reading and watching, but I try to limit it because it is absolutely so terrifying. A friend says her maximum is choose joy. Plays, music, movies, reading. It's hard to see a silver lining. I hope the cast of characters will implode, which is certainly a challenge. Tiffany says working and drawing has helped her. So I'm glad that, Tiffany, you're finding something that keeps you going. And Rose says that I agree about isolation. When we are shocked and upset, it's dangerous. Finding people to be with and those you can commiserate with is something we should prioritize. And that's what we're trying to do with this show. We're trying to create community. We're trying to find ways to bring people together. That's kind of what I felt we could do in this moment. When we have a platform like this, we have a community that's been kind of growing with Shining Light on Shadows, and we're hoping that giving that space to share these concerns is helpful for some folks. Dawn, I know you have a question.
I do have a question for Shawna, because, I think there's the good, the bad, and the ugly with social media, right? And I'm curious on your thoughts. Like when I went on social media on Wednesday after the election, there are several people that on Facebook that are Facebook friends of mine that I care a lot about, but have a very different view than I do. And there was some, gloating and, interesting conversations that were happening. And I just had to block that from my view, because I couldn't ingest that at that point in time. And I know there's this like big thing about like, don't let your differences, separate you from the people that you care about. Can you share, because I know you're big on TikTok, and I know, social media is a big thing. Can you share your thoughts about social media and how we use that during this very difficult time?
I think it's such an important point, and I think there's no one right answer. I know some people they enjoy kind of battling the trolls. That is not my mission. I like to say that mine is not to sing for the deaf or paint for the blind. That's not what my time on this earth is going to be spent doing. So for me, I am very heavy on the mute and the block buttons. And the reason is because that no one is entitled to your mental health. No one is entitled to access for your time. No one is entitled to make you feel lesser than. And if you have a relative that you are really scared that you're going to hurt their feelings, then mute them instead of block them. Or better yet, have a conversation with them about why what they're saying is hurtful. If they care, they will change. If they don't, then that block button is still extremely useful. Part of the reason we're here is because we're so polite. We're so scared of offending someone, and we want to hear everyone out. But here's the issue with that. What we're talking about now is not a difference of opinion. This is a difference of values. We're not saying, would you like for children to be educated in private schools or public schools? We have a subset of people saying that certain children don't deserve to live, have food, and should be incarcerated and just, deported. So these are not small things. We're not saying, hey, do you believe that the LGBTQ community should have tax breaks or not? There are people that say that they should not exist. That is not a difference of opinion. That is a difference of values. And I do think that not being able to distinguish between the two has normalized the hate speech. I have a number, I'm from Texas. I'm a small town in Texas. I have a number of conservative, religious, Republican friends and family members, and they are horrified when someone is picked on. I'll tell you something about Texans. They don't like bullies. They protect children and women. They care about the outdoors and the planet. That is not a Republican. What's happening right now are not Republican values. These are not American values. These are very nasty bullies that were given a microphone and now have overstayed their welcome at a party. That is exactly what's happening here. And there's nothing we can do. We gave them the keys to the house and the security code, and right. So we're stuck right now with whatever damage that they do. We allowed it collectively to get this far. So what can we do? Well, we can leave the party. We can turn off the national news. If your job does not involve watching the news, then what are you doing right now? You cannot stop this. First of all, read it. It's much faster. You don't need it in your head all the time. Put on some classic movies, some Frank Sinatra, something while you're cooking instead of legacy media, because their job is not to comfort you. Their job is to keep you afraid and engaged so that you don't turn the channel. So I would absolutely be so fiercely protective of your mental health. And one trick that has helped me is if someone says something to me and I imagine them saying that exact same something to my daughter, if they're still left standing, then congratulations to them. That must mean that they are not in arm's length. But you find that that is a
Wow.
great clarifier in who needs to be in your life and in your head and who doesn't. We are built to tolerate and smile and be polite through a lot that candidly, I don't think we should.
It's interesting you should say that, and a lot of people are talking about their kind of the sense of being overwhelmed watching the news. It reminds me of the reaction that a lot of people had after 9/11, where watching the footage, and that's obviously it's a little bit different because you don't have that same footage going over. But I would say anytime you see President Trump either speaking or a headline, it's almost like a reminder of that night, and that a lot of people not only made it a point to avoid watching the news, but they also had to figure out how to shield their children from that constant experiencing of that trauma. And so that's something that I think is I remember from the first Trump administration. Every time there was a statement that he made or something he did, and every time we see him, this policy, whether it's a Muslim ban, whether it's what he was doing with COVID, looking at the eclipse without glasses. I mean, every single day there was like something else. And I know that for folks who work in the government, in the bureaucracy, in various agencies, it's even worse because it's coming down. It's affecting their day-to-day life. I know folks whose businesses are being affected, that people are making decisions about contracts and such in anticipation of the inauguration. It's not even there yet, but it's certainly challenging. I want to bring in a few more comments. Stefan says that he is planning on getting getting out a lot over the holidays and seeing lots of friends. And he's starting with mentioning a post-Diwali celebration this weekend. Sri Srinivasan, who is the CEO, co-founder of Digimentors, is hosting a big party in New York. They do that once a year, he and his wife, Rupa. So that's what Stefan is talking about. Jonathan is saying he's fortunate to have his website, flamencoinnewyork.com, to keep him busy or distracted. So certainly encourage folks to check out Jonathan's website. Always good to get something else across your feed. Think of it as a palate cleanser, if you will, if you're tired of seeing the news. Tiffany says that well-meaning friends keep posting things about how horrible things are going to be. I agree with their statements, but I can't look anymore. So it's affecting. It's not just news; it's social media. It's what are you seeing? And I will say, Tiffany, I didn't end up sharing it anywhere, but I found several kind of hopeful and uplifting posts in the days after the election. So I will find those and share them in case that might be a balm for folks. Rose says, I cannot listen to his voice. Post-traumatic stress disorder, really. And that's a good note. I know that Shawna, one of the reasons that we were, when we were talking and we knew you'd be a good person for this show, and that's why we have had you scheduled for our December 12th show, but particularly for this show in terms of your political experience and perspective. You have written about your experience with post-traumatic stress. And I want to start there in terms of the difference between PTS and PTSD. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have been diagnosed with PTS. It was a fairly easy diagnosis. I've been coached by people in the PTS community through advocacy work that I do, particularly with veterans organizations. It is PTSD. They are one and the same. They're synonymous, but particularly people in the advocacy community, they're pushing us to start saying PTS because the post-traumatic stress disorder implies there's something wrong with us for us reacting physically and emotionally to stress and trauma. So in order to remove that stigma and help remove the stigma out of seeking self-care and mental health overall, then we've been coached to start referring to it as PTS. Very new. So if you hear people refer to it, that's why it's out of love and care. So for me, I definitely experienced a lot of childhood trauma. I had very loving parents. However, I grew up in an environment of poverty. And so when you grow up in an environment of poverty, then you witness and see a lot, both in your household and outside of it. And then later on, as a young adult, then one of my clients became a stalker. And after having that ordeal go on for quite some time, I found myself becoming re-victimized by a justice system that did not want to hear anything that I had to say. And I'm sure that a lot of victims of different types of assault can relate. You get made to feel like it's your fault. Is it really that bad? Did you have it coming? Well, what did you do to cause this, etc.? And all of this played out extremely publicly. It was something that was extremely difficult and unsafe and scary to deal with. And it then brought back other moments in my childhood where I was unsafe. So that combination of feeling like I had no safe place to turn and that at any moment he could show up was very, very difficult to deal with. The relationship to this is not only that, trauma is trauma. Again, there's no scale, no one wins, there's no points. So whatever your reason for feeling upset, traumatized, or depressed, that is enough and that is valid. But in this particular situation, my stalker, in my opinion, and through specialists that I've worked with through the years, is a narcissistic psychopath. And according to a number of experts, so is our current president-elect. They share a lot of mannerisms. They move their body and their faces similarly. They have similar tactics where when they are accusing someone of something, it is usually an admission. And there is a lot of similarity there. And so watching someone with that persuasion and that cruelty rise to the highest level of power was extremely traumatizing the first time. I think for me, the reason that it is, I would say it's traumatizing, but I'm able to adjust and adapt faster, is because I do consider that level of unkind human to be an enemy to everything that I value and hold dear. And what he wants for me is to feel small and afraid. And what he wants is for us to relent proactively. He's not going to be able to just universally do much of anything. And so he wants us to be scared. And so the stubbornness in me refuses. I need to acknowledge my sadness and my disappointment. My grief is more for other people that I know are more marginalized than I am, that are going to hurt soon, but also honestly for what I wanted to see happen. I wanted to see us enter this beautiful new age as a country, this renaissance of science and advancement and, you know, unifying different people. I really wanted that, and letting that dream die was one of the saddest things out of all of this for me. But does that mean that I'm going to quiet down and roll over for this guy? Not even kinda. And for me, when I can turn my hopelessness into determination, then that can sometimes get me through the days when I don't feel like getting out of my pajamas.
And Shawna will share more of her story December 12th when she joins us for Shining Light on Shadows, Finding Happiness After Trauma. Again, Shawna is going to be joining us for our next episode. That was the originally scheduled date that we were going to have her on, but she's going to be focusing on finding happiness after trauma, which we were really looking forward to that show. I want to bring up a post that I shared on social media the day after the election, and this speaks a little bit to what Tiffany was saying, that she's seeing a lot of the negative posts. I shared this image of a flower of a plant growing in concrete. For all those whose cares have been our concern, the work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die. That's, of course, the closing words of Ted Kennedy's speech to the Democratic Convention back in 1980. But those words have always been very meaningful for me. And what I wrote that day is, like most people on my feed, and slightly less than, and here I made the point, slightly less than half of the people who voted, not half the country, I'm still trying to make sense of what happened yesterday. I went through a range of emotions: disbelief, anger, sadness, frustration, despair. We all need time to process the election results. I'm inspired by people who are focusing on the work ahead. I'll get there. For now, these words are aspirational. I'm not sure my mind is there quite yet. My heart definitely isn't, but this is where I want to be. And that is kind of what I was thinking on that day. And what I wrote in my blog post, and the title was From Excitement and Optimism in July to Despair on Election Night. If you were shocked, saddened, angered, and or just devastated by the election results, please know that you're not alone. Hopefully, knowing that is the first step toward figuring out where we go from here. And the context for that is, over the last several days running up to the election, Sri hosted a number of shows. I produced them, and this looks like it's only 8 hours. One show went an hour and a half. Our Sunday show is an hour and a half. Some shows went long. Ended up being more than 10 hours of programming. And even before that's just from Sunday to Election Day. And before that, I produced South Asian Men for Harris in the week after she got the nomination. We produced Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Men for Kamala. Another great, one of these online events. You had so many Zoom events that were going on. We also produced a South Asian stand-up for Kamala. So I wasn't working on a campaign. I wasn't covering a campaign, but this was very much a part of my from July onwards, and that excitement and that buildup and that anticipation, and seeing the polls staying tight the whole time. She raised $1 billion. How could she not? How could that not make the difference? And as we saw it come to election night. The only difference for me is, and I wrote about this in 2016 for folks who might remember when Hillary Clinton ran against Donald Trump. For folks who are watching the New York Times ticker, the ticker was down here, almost as if Hillary Clinton would win for much of the early evening, and then slowly it started kind of going the other way, and it hit that midpoint, and then it was like, what's going on? And this is going into Trump territory. Last week, when I checked the ticker around 9 o'clock, I think, or so, it was already past the halfway toward Trump. I mean, it wasn't even, there wasn't, any give, and it just got worse as the night went on. And it was just after so many months, I mean, I can't overstate this idea of having Kamala Devi Harris, a South Asian and African American woman, be president. I was thinking of my daughter. I was thinking of everyone else who could look up to her with pride. And then, boom, a first female president. I mean, a first woman. How could that get pulled out from under us? And maybe if she was running against someone who was more mainstream Republican, if those still exist, in 20 years ago, maybe there were Republicans that weren't crazy. I don't know how else to put it. It might have been easier to take, but to have Donald Trump instead of Kamala Harris was just it was just too much. It was just too much. Kate says that hit me hard. So much describes my emotions. I feel you, Shawna, for when Shawna was describing some of the impacts. Jonathan says those shows were fantastic that we produced. I know Jonathan watched almost all of them.
That was me that typed in the courage is not
typed in the comment. That's the I'll pull it. It came into Shawna's Facebook. But Dawn was writing, "Courage is not the absence of fear." That was a quote that you shared, Dawn, on social media, and that's in your blog post. Do you want to speak to that real briefly while I pull it up?
Yeah, I think that people see fear as weakness, and I have learned throughout life that that you can be courageous and be a warrior and be someone who fights for what they believe in and still be afraid. And that is okay. And in fact, for me, oftentimes fear of a particular situation drives me to make change more than any other factor. If I feel fear about something, then I know other people feel fear, and my daughter feels fear, and my son feels fear, and that drives me to make it so that it isn't as scary as what it is. So this particular quote was one of the things that I was able to kind of hold on to, and remember what my why is. And so, you know, I think those are some other ways, and Shawna, please jump in, but those are some other ways, like finding those nuggets, those pieces that help you to grapple with what you're feeling and what your emotions are, and using that to not be isolated and to not just kind of give up is something that I think is important. Shawna, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think what both you and Neil are saying is so important. And I think that if we're, listen, this was a big one. And so we have to have this grown up conversation. And one of the aspects of that grown up conversation is really being honest with ourselves about the how and the why. And the bottom line is that while our country likes to think it's big and bad, we are still fairly young compared to others. And, you know, Kamala Harris relayed the story of going with her mother in her stroller to civil rights marches, going with her father to similar events. This happened because we live in a structure of white supremacy and a toxic patriarchy. That is how this happened. This is how you have the most talented, qualified women that we have known in a generation run for office, and one of the least qualified, untalented, uncharismatic, boorish humans topple them. It's not because it's something mysterious or magnificent that we're missing. It's not something where we can paint all of his supporters with one brush. This is a stacked deck. This is a game that is rigged. And we have to start dismantling those toxic, oppressive systems if we're going to change this. Not at once. You don't even have to begin today. But one of the ways to do that is to refuse to give in to language that we're already starting to hear. Oh, well, I guess this means we can't run a woman again. Oh, I guess we've got to stick to white guys. Oh, I guess that all white guys are the problem. Divisiveness, toxicity, hopelessness, saying that things will never change. Things will never change if we do not change them. And if we allow ourselves to hear that negativity, that our daughters will never see that role model shatter that last glass ceiling. If our communities are just told that feeling unsafe is the cost of doing business, of being an American, I reject those things. I think most people reject those ideals, but it's not that we were running against one person. We are running against a system of oppression, and it takes time. And while we didn't win this battle, I do believe that Kamala Harris and the broad coalition that she put together in a beautiful campaign that was built on the backs of so many others before her, it broke something in the most beautiful way that is not going to go back together. I think that statement of "we are not going back" is going to echo throughout these next 4 years and beyond. And I don't like it. I think she deserved the win, but we don't always get what's fair. I think no doubt she brought us closer to equity. We just didn't get all of the way there.
Thank you, Shawna. I want to read out, and I've left it on the screen, this graphic that Dawn had shared. It's a quote from Nelson Mandela. "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. I felt fear myself more times than I can remember, but I hid it behind a mask of boldness. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." And we have a lot to conquer going forward. I want to welcome folks who are watching on Instagram in particular. We can't, unfortunately, show your comment on the screen, but I'm going to turn off camera. I hate doing it, but I'm going to turn off to the side. In particular, Amy Smith, a former high school classmate of mine, who I don't know if, Amy, if you've watched the show before. If this is your first time, thank you so much for joining us. But Amy wrote that, "Thank you for talking about this. I'm terrified. I'm terrified." And she followed up by saying, "This is the first time," referring to 2016, "I was angry. This time I'm sad." So thank you to everyone watching on Instagram, including Marsha Forbes, a former United Way colleague, Parbod Kamar Sharma, of course, and several other people as well. We have just a few more minutes left with Shawna Presley Vercher. She is the political fixer. You can find her on social media. I'm going to put her handles back on screen for you so you can make sure to follow her. She is at Shawna Vercher on Twitter, Shawna.Vercher on Instagram, and Political Fixer on TikTok. And you should definitely check out her videos on TikTok. And in fact, Shawna, you're going to be going live on TikTok in just about half an hour, right? 8:30 Eastern time?
Yeah, we're going live for the first time since election night at 8:30 Eastern. We shifted to a later time block so our West Coast family could join us. And we're going to be talking about, similar conversation to some of this, which is how we feel and acknowledging that. But my love language is music, similar to Dawn's, but also work. My work is my love. It's my passion. Aside from my family, it is what I care the most about. And I do believe the advocacy work must continue, and it does help me heal. So we're going to be announcing our biggest project yet. This is the biggest project I have ever taken on in my entire career. And I say that as someone who calls the Obama campaign her second child. I was on that for 23 months. That's why I believe Maddie is an only child. So we're going to be announcing what that is on the 8:30 live show and bringing in the DigiMentors family and hopefully many of you on this journey. I don't say that as an advocacy for meaning that all of you need to jump into work. Far from it. I think all of us do need to sit back and take time with this. For me, I feel more safe when I'm in action, but that's a personal choice. And I would also just please ask everyone to understand that grief is not linear. We talk about the 7 steps or the 7 stages of grief as if we get to pass a level like it's Mario and then we don't have to go back. That is not how it works at all. So you might think you're out of the rage stage, huzzah, and then something will happen and remind you of why you are rightfully angry, and it will send you back there. So maintaining that and giving yourself some guardrails on how you're going to express it in a healthy way, like Dawn's retail therapy or Neil traveling with his family, those are healthy ways to get out and do things. Taking steps away from the family and doing some things alone when necessary, also sometimes important. But I would give ourselves just a lot of grace to migrate back and forth through these stages of grief. And I don't know what everyone's living situation is. I don't know what your community is, but I am telling you, as someone who has done social justice and advocacy work for more years than I would like to admit, you are absolutely justified in what you're feeling. This loss mattered. It meant something. It should have meant something, and you have a right to grieve it.
Thank you, Shawna. I want to bring in a few more comments from folks. Jim Newberg, Dawn's lovely husband on the other side of the wall there. Love is the only thing that I will fight this hate machine juggernaut. I will not let them change who I am or what I value.
Why
said,
I married
Jim.
him.
Well said. Stefan says, after the vile hate-filled rally at Madison Square Garden just before Election Day, towards so many, it was hard to imagine that behavior now on steroids taking over the country once he is sworn in. We saw that in 2016 after he was elected and after he took office, that the number of racist comments and behavior in stores, in schools, in everyday life just skyrocketed. And there's no reason to think that won't be the same. And I think we've seen that with racist text messages going out to Black students on college campuses, letting them know that they should report to the plantation, the next morning for their work as a slave. It's just absolutely vile and disgusting.
May I speak to that briefly?
Please.
So those things have something really critical in common, which is that most of it is done anonymously. when you think about social media posts, when you think about the most vile videos, when you think about even the anonymity, I got this one, of being in a large crowd, of those text messages, one thing that bullies have in common is that they are cowards, especially when you separate them and they face consequences. And so I believe that one thing that is different in this election and in this coalition that we have control over, that we are not ceding, is that we are going to continue to say, no, this is unacceptable. One of the reasons many people did not speak out in 2016 is, candidly, they thought it would kind of work itself out. So why address something so uncomfortable and vile? Why give it oxygen? There was a lot of true rationalization that you could argue and justify because we thought it was very temporary. We can't argue that anymore, and we need to put racism and misogyny and hate back in its box where it's ashamed, and that falls on all of us. That doesn't mean you have to cut everyone out in your life, but it does mean if someone says something hateful at Thanksgiving dinner, it's like, hey, listen, I respect you, but what you just said is not appropriate and it's not okay with me. That's a totally acceptable thing to do. It will make people feel uncomfortable for about 30 seconds, but it will have a lasting impression on everyone else at that dinner table who just felt protected by you. And I would encourage you to use that as some of your homework moving forward. You want this stuff to stop, make them embarrassed to do it.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. That was just a brilliant statement. So I wanted to sit with it for a minute because I think that it's very, very true. And I know it happens in my own family where there's like a pause for silence and no one says anything and everybody just kind of looks at each other like, and then the excuse is made, like, oh, it's my dad who's, 86 years old. And it's like, oh, that's just grandpa. And, we shouldn't say anything. And you're absolutely right that, that brief minute to step up and say something. I really liked how you put that. So thank you for that reminder, Shawna.
I am a messenger by trade. This is what I do. And I'm giving all of you this, I call it sandwich messaging. It's called bread, meat, bread. So you say something nice at the beginning. Listen, Grandpa, I love you and I have so much respect for you. The meat. But what you just said is very hurtful and it's not okay with me. We actually don't say that anymore because it hurts people's feelings. Bread. I know you probably didn't mean anything by it, but if you could not say that again, that would mean a lot to me. Right? You don't have to be a jerk to stand up for people. I think that's something to keep in mind. And the other thing I would love for us to keep in mind is we just had the final act of this particular movie in our saga. The heroine is not going to come in and slay all of the dragons for us. We are now the stars of our own movie. It's okay to be the star of your movie and speak up at dinner and stand up for the family members. I got news for you all. You're all dragon slayers now. I anoint you thusly. Please go forward.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Sarah Tuma says, well said, Shawna. And Stefan says, Shawna just had the mic drop of the night. Spot on. So a lot of great response to those comments. And Tiffany says, it's hard to speak up. I am going to say no more, which is great. And I think that's what we're hoping, if nothing else, we want to help people, give people the courage, give people the strength, give people the words they need to move forward. And if that means saying no, if that means challenging someone who says something offensive, if it means finding the strength inside to resist in some way, shape, or form. I know that during the first Trump administration, lawyers gathered at airports to help address concerns around the Muslim ban and immigration issues. So whatever your area of expertise is, whatever you can do, there will be a way for you to help when you're ready and after you've taken care of yourself. My name is Neil Parekh. Dawn Helmrich Newberg is my co-host. Our guest has been Shawna Presley Vercher. This has been a very special post-election Shining Light on Shadows, talking about despair, anger, fear, all the emotions that we've been feeling, and kind of planning for the future. Jonathan says, wonderful show. Shawna is always a provocative guest, and tonight gave us some wonderful, significant quotes. Thank you. And Stefan says, good night, stay strong, and get ready to keep causing good trouble. Absolutely. I work with the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation, doing communications and social media. We do need to get into good trouble, necessary trouble, as Congressman Lewis told us so many times. So, Shawna, thank you for joining us. We will see you again in just a couple of weeks. We will not be doing a show the fourth Thursday this month, because that will be Thanksgiving. We hope you all have a great time with family and friends, whether you're traveling, whether you're hosting. Please know that that might be a challenging time. It might also be a time to reset and recharge. And we will see you again in December. Thank you very much. And we'll keep working on this. Take care. Bye-bye.